How is everybody? It's just wonderful to be a preacher here. You get all this honesty, it just springs out. Well, you know how it goes. Two men were at a bus stop one time together. A third approached them and said, I want to give you something. He said, yeah, this is what you have to agree to. Okay, what is it? You have to agree that you'll live a day. You can live it ever how you want to live it. And you only get to live that day the way you want to live it. And then after that, you have to go back to living the way you were living before. Will you agree to do that? Yes, yes. So he gave them a little time to think about how they wanted to live their day. The first one decided that he wanted to live his life in luxurious, posh circumstances. Everything that money could buy, just the most expensive of days, if you will, that ever was. The other one chose poverty. He didn't want anything. He wanted to live as if he had nothing. And so, at the end of the day, they went back to their regular life. But the next day, they were at the bus stop. And while standing at the bus stop, they were talking. The first one said, well, how was your day? And the other one said, well, fine. How was yours? Oh, man, I lived in luxury. I had everything that money could buy. And now I'm miserable. You're miserable, yes, because I saw how life could be. And I realized that I didn't have it. So he asked then the man, he says, well, how was your day? He says, well, mine was fine. But he said, I chose poverty. Poverty. Who would want to live in poverty? He said, well, I got to thinking about it. And he said, what I thought has become the reality. What's that? Well, I thought that if I lived in poverty, eating anything and everything and having to scratch out an existence for a day, I learned that what I had was sufficient. And I would be thankful for it. And he said, and it's turned out to be so. We live in a day and age of content, but we need contentment. We live in a time which really is interesting because a lot of the younger adults are really searching for contentment. And while I may not always agree with their search and what they're trying to find contentment in, I appreciate the fact that they want to live a more simple life. Now, I'm not saying this evening, I'm not saying I want you to get a tiny house and I want you to live a tenth acre, to give up all your worldly possessions. Because you see, I'm not willing to do that. But I want us to learn to be happy with what we have. And that's important. And it's not to say that you're not, but it is to say that we need to be mindful that the Bible teaches us contentment. As we think about contentment, we realize that the Bible speaks about it several places, a couple of places, such as Hebrews chapter 13. The Hebrew writer in verse 5 says that we're to let our conduct or to let our life be without covetousness, but we're to be content with such things as we have. Paul would write in 1 Timothy chapter 6. He would begin in verse 6 and go through verse 8, but he would tell us we need to be content. Godliness with great gain. The Bible speaks about appreciating what you have. Socrates was known to go through the marketplace at least once a day. And folks couldn't understand why this wise man would want to go through the marketplace each day. And he would say, I learned to be content, to be happy with what I have by looking at the market and seeing that I don't need all of those things. We're reminded then of, while the Bible tells us to be content, we might ask ourselves, what is content? There's definitions that I found that some of them kind of tickle me. So one said that it is freedom from discomfort or care. Another said that it's detachment from anxious concerns. Another expounded upon that and said that it's detachment from anxious concerns about the outward features of this life. Another said that it's restfulness in the midst of chaos. What is contentment? Contentment is the idea of being happy with what you have. We live, as we've said, in a very materialistic society. That's just part of it. And everyone wants more. Whatever you've got, everybody wants more. That's why we go shopping, right? Difference in men shopping and women shopping. I'm going to tell you the difference. Men shop to get what they want. Women shop to see what they don't have. Women shop in order to buy what they don't have. That's why it maybe is good that we have Amazon now. You don't see everything because the market is full and the marketplace is full. And you might say, well, we need that for enterprise. We need that for entrepreneurship and all of those things. And I get that. But we need to understand that sometimes we need to simply be happy with what we have. What hinders our happiness with what we have? What hinders our being at peace and wanting more? What hinders our contentment? Well, the Bible gives us a few. The first one is covetousness. The Hebrews passage that we talked about just a second ago, Hebrews 13, verse 5. The writer said, reminds us that we're to be individuals that let our conduct be without covetousness. What's covetousness? Covetousness is wanting more. The idea of I'll take more, and more will make me happy. Story is told of a man that had this beautiful piece of property, and he put this sign out on it, and he said, "Free to the first man that I can find that's content." There were 100 people that inquired about this piece of property. And the man turned every one of them away. And here's how he turned them away. You want this piece of property? Yes, I do. Why? Well, I think I'm very happy and content. You do? Yes, I do. Then why do you want this piece of property? They all walked out the door. Now, that's not to say, and let's back up. That's not to say we can't own things. It's not to say we can't buy things and we can't use what we have. And some are blessed with more than others. And that's all fine. When you stop and think about the 5 and the 2 and the 1, God really told us that there's going to be differences. People are going to have differences. And it's not so much that we have differences, it's how you use what you have that's really important. But we need to understand that one of the driving forces in folks not being happy with where they are is the idea that they just want more. You can turn on the TV set and you just, I want that. I want that. Suzanne and I went to the store the other night. I said, I've got 3 books. No, I got 4 books that I'm either reading on now or in my soon-to-read pile. I found another book the other day when we were in the store. I didn't buy it. because I hinted and my wife just kind of moved on. So I took the hint, maybe I need to wait till I get my pile down a little bit more. We want more. But then second enemy of contentment is envy. Envy is the idea, and this is the best definition I've ever seen for envy. Found it somewhere a long time ago. Envy is being happy with what you have until your neighbor has something that's bigger. And then you want that. I've always thought that was a pretty good definition. The author of that said, and you got to remember this is kind of old, but the author of that said is being happy with your Ford until your neighbor comes in with a Cadillac, and then you want a Cadillac. That's envy. Bible tells us that we're not to be envious individuals. In 1 Samuel, the 18th chapter, David goes out and kills Goliath. And when he goes out and kills Goliath, remember as they come back, as the soldiers come back. Now, this is the giant that nobody would go against. And David did with his slingshot. The little shepherd boy did with his slingshot without all the armor that the soldiers wanted to put on him. When they come back, these ladies are singing what's called an antiphonal song. An antiphonal song is where it starts out and it just builds. And the building does not mean more importance. It's just building, building to a crescendo, building to an end. And here's their song. Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000. And it is at that point that Saul becomes envious of David, of the position that Saul saw David being in. So Peter would remind us in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 1, that we're to put away envy. Paul would also remind the church at Rome in Romans 13:13, put away envy. Envy, though, a lot of times keeps us from being happy with what we have. Never satisfied. That's part of all of this, isn't it? But there are those folks that can never be satisfied. But not just things, but about life. It doesn't matter. They just can't be happy. They can't be happy not only with what they have, they can't be happy with what's going on. They can't be happy with the world. They can't be happy with people. They just can't be happy. They can't be satisfied. And they can't be content. They can't have that peace because they'd rather not be satisfied. They'd rather be individuals that are grumpy and bumpy. Make everybody else like bumpy, right? But they're never happy. They're never happy with what goes on. If it rains, it's supposed to sunshine. And if the sun is shining, it's supposed to be raining. And that leads you then really to another group that has problems. And that's those that complain. The children of Israel murmured when they were in Egyptian bondage, murmured when they got to the Red Sea, murmured when they got to Kadesh, murmured when they got further in the wilderness. It's complaining. Paul, even in talking about the children of Israel in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 10, talked about those that murmur. And what Paul himself would later write to the church of Philippi in Philippians chapter 2, verse 14, he'd say, put away murmuring and complaining. The complainant, the individual that complains, the complainer, often does what? Has to look for the negative. Has to look for what they don't have. Has to look for what makes them unhappy. And is happy in being unhappy. Now you might say, preacher, that's just a bunch of psychological round and round. Think about it. The individual that constantly complains is not happy, first of all, with themselves and what's going on in their life. but they have difficulty looking for what is good and what is a blessing. And so consequently, what they see is what they complain about. Because their view, their lens that they look through, what's called nowadays their world view, is dim and dark. And so they end up not being happy. But the Bible tells us, surely I did something to this. Froze up on. Okay. Well, we'll go on. Yeah, I quit. It'll probably jump about 3 places now. But we want to learn how to cultivate contentment. Well, how do we cultivate contentment? We cultivate contentment, first of all, by working at it. In Philippians chapter 4 and verse 11, go back one. In Philippians chapter 4, verse 11, it doesn't have anything on it. Did I not? I thought I did. Okay. Anyway, Philippians chapter 4, verse 11, Paul said, I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. Oh, anyway, I've learned to be content. Now, let's go back to this and we'll just watch him. To be happy with what we have. Now think about what he said. We've talked about this verse before, but I want us to think about it within the context of this sermon this evening. Paul said, I've learned. The word learn there means to learn through experience. Now, how do you learn through experience? You go through things, right? It's not something that you picked up by reading a book. It's not something that you pick up by just, feeling. It's something that you pick up through experience. Paul had to work at being happy. And Paul encouraged the church of Philippi, you got to be happy. I have learned. I have come to an understanding of what contentment is. And I've come to that understanding through time and through experience, through what I've gone through in life. And then Paul says, secondly, he says, we not only need to learn to be content and work at it, but in order to be content, we have to count our blessings. Paul talked about in everything give thanks. 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 18. He talked about in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 20, giving thanks always for all things. God the Father, in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Also in 1 Chronicles chapter 16 and verse 30, we're reminded that we're to be happy, content. That's what we have. Thankful. Thankful for what we have. Count our blessings. Sometimes we want a little more than our blessings, right? A little extra. Yeah, I want a sundae, but put hot fudge on it. I want a sundae, but put some whipped cream and a cherry on it. Put a banana with it, make a banana split, add 3 more scoops. Come on, let's get on bigger. It's all right. Count your blessings. Be thankful for what you have. See what you have. There's been many of folk that had great collections, and it's good to have collections. I've got collections. Mine are called books. Sue's has collections. Most of them are in the basement. We collect all kinds of things, right? We all do. But in collecting things, there's been stories through the years, and I didn't want to drag out all of these, but of individuals that were rich and had big collections and had them in storage units, and then go searching for something only to find out that the one piece they were searching for is in their storage collection or stored collection. We need to be thankful for what we have. Count your blessings, name them one by one. But then we also, thirdly, we need to trust in the presence of God. You might say, well, how does that help me be content? By understanding that God's there. we understand that that's really all we need. We want to make our life happy. We want to make it fun. We want to make it fulfilled. But in doing such, where are we looking? Where are we looking for our fulfillment? Where are we looking for getting more? Is it from God or is it from the world? Is it from having more? I still like the old story. I've shared it with you before. I still love the story of the man that checks into the hospital and the nurse, you have to fill out 10 million papers and all, and she's filling out all these papers and she's telling him where the nurse button is and here's the TV button. And she said, and if there's anything in here that you need but you don't have, she said, call me. Push this button and call me. She said, I'll come down here and tell you how to get along without it. Well, we have to learn to count what we have. Then next, and trust in God's presence. He's there for us. But then next, trust in God's promises, that it will be even as God said. That's what Paul told them. Remember in Acts 27 and verse 25. As he was going in the ship, and God had spoken to him and told him, you're going to be all right. And when he relayed the message, he said, I believe God. While that wonderful passage that we're all familiar with of Proverbs chapter 3, trust in the Lord with all your heart, do not lean upon your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him, he'll bring it to pass. Did you catch the first part and the very last part? Trust in the Lord, he'll bring it to pass. That's all you need to know. That middle part, that's a very important part with regards to that verse. But in life itself, if we'll learn to trust in the promises of God, if we'll understand that it will be just as God said that it will be. When you think about the promises of God, you think about the peace that he says that passes all understanding that he's willing to give us. You think about Matthew 11:28, where he says, come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, I'll give you rest. I'll give you peace. When you think about these blessings, when you think about the blessing of Hebrews chapter 2 and verse 18, that Jesus was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin, Hebrews chapter 4, but he became like his brethren. Hebrews chapter 2 verse 18 says that he might be a merciful and faithful high priest, that he might be able to be one that sympathizes and empathizes with his children. The promise of Hebrews chapter 7 verse 25. He's able to save to the uttermost those that come to God by him. Those promises, and the countless number of promises that we have. You remember the song? The chorus goes like this. God will take care of you. It's such a truth. And if we just rely and trust on his promises, he'll get us through. But then next, enjoy the simple life. A little bit that a righteous man has is better than the riches of the wicked. Psalm 37, verse 16. The little things in life. The little things in life are the most joyous things. A baby's laugh. Doesn't that make you feel good? Baby smile. I told lunch, I've gotten to the age where when Suzanne and I walk through the store, I'm just pointing at all the little ones. Oh, look at that one. Isn't that one cute? Isn't that precious? Suzanne gets tired of it because she works with them all the time. It's just the simple things. Simple things in life. And we usually find out somewhere in our later years that it really is the simple things. It's those things that make us happy. The little things that's done, little things we see. It's always fun when some of us at NHC every Sunday to go around and see 2 or 3 of them in their room, and most of them have some kind of flower a lot of times. And you say something about the flower and they just light up. Somebody brought them a flower and it just made them feel good. It's just the simple things in life. We need to learn from that. But in learning contentment, we must be content with what we have and not where we are. There's a difference. We've already looked at the Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5 passage. It says, let your conduct be without covetousness, be content with such things you have. But isn't it interesting? The same writer also wrote Hebrews chapter 6 and verse 1. Therefore, leaving the discussion of the elementary principles of Christ, let us go unto perfection. Not laying again the foundation of repentance, God from dead works. That's the point. The Hebrew writer says, you got to understand that you should never be satisfied where your soul is. You should never be satisfied with your spiritual life. Preacher, that's terrible. God has given me so much, yes. But as Christians, we have been charged not just to be like Christ, not just to pray, not just to read our Bible, but we have been charged as Christians to grow. And growth must continue as long as we live. And while we grow in the grace and knowledge of the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, Peter 3, verse 18, we're individuals that keep that growth going. And so we're never satisfied. We're always those individuals that are hungering and thirsting after righteousness and growing in that direction. It's interesting. You look at the front urns out here. I noticed this tonight of the flowers. Now, you have to understand a little bit if you're not here a lot and pay attention, and I'm not saying anybody's not smart. I'm just saying if you're not here to see kind of all the seasons, so to speak. This urn on this side gets daylight, but no direct sun. It's mostly shaded. This one over here gets a whole lot of sun. These plants came from the same place, given to us by the same individual, put in those urns by this individual. And they're watered at the same time with the same amount of water because I watered. Put in the same potting soil, same time. These on this side that are not in the sunlight, but just in the daylight, they're growing tall. These on this side, they're growing short and thick. Why? Because of what's in the light as opposed to what's in the daylight. As Christians, we grow in the light of Jesus Christ. I am the light of the world. But the question is, are you growing? And which way are you growing? Happiness, contentment? Oh, yes. But at the same time, continue to grow in God. This evening, if you have need of his invitation, won't you come while together we stand and sing?